I think we can wait for 5 more minutes and then we can begin. Till then, anyone would like to talk about what they're expecting from this session or what they're hoping to learn today?
Can I go ahead?
Sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that I will be taking part actively in today's session. I'm excited.
Perfect. Thank you.
Hello, ma'am.
Hi, Kruti. Am I
Uh,
pronouncing that right?
yeah, yeah.
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 Go ahead.
So yesterday we talked about window of tolerance. So I would like to know more about it. Like, is there a strategy or something where we could increase a little our window of tolerance, or we could work upon it, or something which we can help our clients also with the same?
So usually, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, yeah. So usually what happens is that with the window of tolerance, it's actually a tool to help you understand where your client is, right, in the ladder that we did. Do you remember the ladder?
Yes, yes.
So the window of tolerance essentially helps us to understand what is tolerable to the client, right? So there are a few exercises like the song one we did, right?
Mm.
But apart from that, since we are just trainees and since we are going to be therapists, it's not in, this work that you're talking about does not come under our purview, and I will be talking about a little about that towards the end of it. So what happens is that you have to be trained in trauma therapy. What we are
Okay.
doing essentially in these two sessions are training you to be trauma informed. And trauma informed can be therapists, they can be doctors, they can be first aid providers, they can be the EMTs that come first to the site, right? So the essential idea is that when you see someone in distress, you are able to stabilize them in that moment, and from there on, if there is something deeper, if the issue is much deeper and there's a lot of trauma, instead of you dealing with the trauma, you refer them to someone who's the expert. Does that
Okay.
answer your question?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sure. Thank you.
Sure. I guess 1 more minute and then we can start. I'll just share my screen. Okay, let's begin. So, this session we're going to focus a little bit more on the theory, like I mentioned yesterday. I have a few exercises. Toward the end, there's a longer exercise, so that may take up some time. But I urge you to, even if you like drop out, do come back for the last exercise because it's one of the exercises that can help you and your client grow, right? So now that we're beginning with this, would someone like to talk about why do you think it is important to be trauma informed? And why do I call, why do usually trauma therapists or therapists have started calling things which, discrimination and all of this as systemic oppression? Any idea? Feel free to type, feel free to unmute yourself.
May I? Oh, I'm so sorry. Please go ahead, Ida.
No, Durva, go
No, I
ahead.
was waiting for that somebody should come up. If nobody is answering, you please go ahead.
All right. Can you hear me though? Is there a lot of background
Yeah,
noise?
yeah.
Okay, all right. So I understand that, any sort of discrimination is sort of systemic in nature in the sense that it's in the system. And we are socialized to hold certain groups of people, on a different level than other groups of people. Right? So every day, so for example, for a queer person, like every day living in a cis heteronormative world is oppression. It is also traumatic for them because they have to deal with a lot of aggressions. These can be microaggressions or macroaggressions, and they have to, like, no matter how open a country is, no matter how equal the country portrays themselves to be, it may not necessarily be equitable. Which is why, systemic oppression and trauma sort of goes hand in hand. And yeah, I hope that answers your question.
It definitely does, and I'm wondering if you actually need this session because that was such a comprehensive answer.
No, it's always good to know more. So I definitely need it. Thank you.
Okay. So, energy check in before we proceed. Since it is going to be a heavy session, I just want to understand where you guys are with your energies, just like we did yesterday. On a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being the lowest energy and 10 being the highest. Oh, Kavya is at a 7. All of you just type it fast. Yeah, 8, 8, okay. 8, nice. Okay, wow, great, nice. Okay, amazing. Okay, so as usual, we will have some trigger warnings and disclaimers. So this trigger warning actually goes for you also beyond this session because nowadays with Instagram and a lot of news and Instagram that we consume on a daily basis because it's so readily available. One thing that we need to understand is that so yesterday we talked about how threat is almost automatic. We sense threat, we sense unsafety, and we can feel that in our body, right? So if we are going through a lot of material, and then if please trust your body and your mind in the sense that if you feel this is overwhelming for me, I am not able to concentrate right now, I don't think I need this right now, maybe later on, or anything that your body is signaling you to, please take that in, and you may feel free to log out or feel free to type it in the chat if someone is feeling a lot overwhelmed, and we can do another exercise for like 5-10 minutes if the group agrees. Although I do have brief check-ins in the middle since it is going to be theory oriented today. Another disclaimer: when I would be referring about the community and when I say the word queer, I also mean ideology and identity because queer is also an ideology, right? And it also translates into our practice. And again, mentioning we are not queer affirmative therapists, we are queer friendly therapists because we've not undergone the right training yet. We had a module, but that does not qualify us as queer affirmative therapists. Great. Now that's out of the way. We talked about the context, right? So why should we be trauma informed in context of the systemic oppression? What does trauma informed do? Like yesterday, we went through what being trauma informed is about, what all constitutes of information about what trauma is, what are the probable responses. So, why is it needed when we are talking about a particularly marginalized community? And
Can I
in
take a try?
sure, sure.
Yeah. So I didn't attend your last session completely, though from how I see it is that, like, in general, the LGBTQIA plus community is a vulnerable community, right? In India specifically. And being trauma informed helps us in making a good and healthy communication and a relationship with them. Because you never know what might trigger them. Maybe a male person's uncle has sexually abused them, right? And you just ask like very lightly that how's your uncle, how is the relationship with him, or anything of that sort, might just trigger him. So being trauma informed and using the right words and being a very good communicator with them, I think, is essential.
Definitely. That is definitely a large part of being trauma informed. Thank you for that. And also, I would like to understand, like Uttari mentioned, that how it's relevant in our clinical practice, right? But as we proceed today, we that when we talk about trauma informed care, we are also talking about something that should not re traumatize, in the sense, just like Uttari said, that we don't ask the wrong question or we don't ask something that may trigger them. But having said that, it is very, very much possible, and this is not coming from me, this is coming from experienced therapists, that sometimes you may do something that may trigger another person, right? Because there's no way of us knowing before we've met a person what their triggers are. So it's all right if you do trigger them. Not like it's not like very good, very nice, but I'm just saying that if it happens with you, the important aspect is that if you're trauma informed, you'll be able to know how to calm them down or how to bring them in a zone of safety again, and how to not take it personally as well, right? Okay. So sorry, trigger warning here. I'm going to be presenting you a few snapshots of a few headlines, and I'd just like you to go through them fast, and I'll just talk about it a little bit. And we'll just talk about, the many things that the small traumas or the big traumas that may constitute for the LGBTQI community. So, all of these are based in 2020, not even 2 years ago, and in fact, in the pandemic. So, we've been seeing a lot of, talk by mental health professionals that, oh, the youth mental health crisis has become an epidemic. And as we were going through the pandemic, there was an epidemic of mental health. But what we fail to recognize here is that it's because of two, three things, right? More than two, three things, of course. But why is all of this erupting? If you carefully see these headlines, they talk about the fear and trauma of conversion therapy. They talk about domestic violence and pressure to convert again, and also the family prejudice. So, uh, not feeling safe in your own home, right? These are very different experiences that every person experience. But what's important to know here is that, you know uh, for this community there is a concept of coming out, but we never talk about, oh, I am straight, I'm coming out to my family, because that's the norm and that's what expected of us. And that is how things become very different for this community and often become oppressive, because then you're looked at as someone who is not okay, who's not right. And then what also happens is, because queer affirmative therapy has come on, recently in India. And before that, people, even therapists, would look at it as some sort of disorder. And the decriminalization of the community and of not just the community, but also, not just in India, but also abroad. There's so many aspects of discrimination that would continue. Because in the DSM itself, you know, we being attracted to the same sex was constituted as a disorder. So, all of this, why trauma informed helps us is it helps us to have a contextual understanding of a person instead of just a clinical understanding, right? Okay. So, naturally, there is a sense of threat, there's a sense of unsafety. We talk about coming out, and then there's always that talk about acceptance. And especially for if you're working with children or adolescents who are trying to understand themselves, who are trying to find themselves, we don't introduce literature in school which talks about, the spectrum that is there, about, the non-binary spectrum, so to say. And we just talk about, oh, there's a boy, there's a girl, blue, pink, and all of those binaries. So in addition to the fear of that rejection, there's also higher sexual and physical abuse if someone does choose to, own up to their sexuality or their queerness. Then, of course, family strain, like we talked about, and the rejection of their identity, and family being the first primary caregiver. If there is a distance from them when you're a child, it must be so difficult, right, to accept your own self. So, since this was a lot of information in like just 5 minutes, what I would like you all to do is please grab an object, whatever feels safe to you, and we will take 2 to 3 minutes. Have a cup of coffee or bring something to drink. If it's really hot, bring something cold, touch it or just taste it. Or if you don't feel grounded, if you're feeling, oh my god, this is too much, just literally stand off the ground as well, right? We'll take 2 minutes here because it is a lot of information too fast. I'll also be having water. Also, at the same time, if you feel okay and if you're ready to continue uh, right now, or if you want to take a minute, just write down on chat when you're ready. And do let me know if I'm going too fast. I can always dial it down a little. Okay. Just notice a little bit about how this information is settling in for you. What are you feeling? There might be emotions coming if you're in the community. Maybe if you're not in the community, then also there might be emotions coming out for you. And it's okay if we want to discuss about that, because a lot of systemic and contextual training is about having tough dialogues with each other and to normalize those dialogues. So if there's something coming up for you that does not feel very bearable and you would like to share with the group, please feel free to do so as well. You can also close your eyes for a minute and just rub your hands like this and put them on your eyes for like 2 to 3 seconds, and then just come back. And once you're ready to move on, you can just write okay on the chat. Definitely, Ira. That's very true. And that is why trauma informed care is not just limited to psychology. Because like there are a lot of case studies I've read as part of my training that I can share with you all. Um, that talk about how systems that are not trauma informed, how they induce reactions from survivors of trauma. So, for example, there was a lady in the Holocaust who was getting, who went to a hospital, and the physician did not know that she was in the Holocaust. And so, because she was not cooperating, they restrained her somehow. But that was so similar to the treatment she got, that it was very difficult for her to come back in the moment and just feel safe again. Okay, another check in, energy check in. Where are you all on a scale of 0 to 10? I think my internet is breaking, so I'll just. Is my internet breaking, Ira? No?
In between, a little of your voice was breaking, but it's comprehensible.
Okay. Okay. Kainat, Aditi, Durva, Kruti, Shweta, how are you guys feeling right now? Are we comfortable to move ahead? There is a silver lining ahead, I promise. You're good to go. Okay. So we'll start. So, just a little question. Okay, great. So now that you have this information and you have the information about what trauma symptoms can look like and what happens in a contextual sense. So, if you were a clinician, what do you think has changed in your perspective? As in, if you would not have attended this training, say, and if you did not have an understanding of trauma, how would you have formalized a case or understood the person who would be presenting you with, symptoms like just zoning out, being extremely forgetful, like you ask something and they're like, oh, what? I'm sorry, what? And then they are restless, like they can't stop shaking their leg and they're agitated, they lash out if you just touch their shoulder, maybe somewhere if they are in a place where it's not feel too safe. So what do you think your reaction would have been? Write it down on chat or you can talk about it. There are no right or wrong answers here. Like on the top of your head, what would you have said? Anxiety, maybe schizophrenia, maybe OCD, or what would you have said if you did not know about the trauma lens? Feel free to unmute yourself. Okay, you would have felt there's resistance. Yeah, definitely.
Nath, can you elaborate on that? I would like to maybe know more about the resistance that you would feel. You're comfortable. Because it's really interesting that how you would, as professionals, go back and resist if you don't know the trauma. How would you feel? Any of you? Maybe I would have felt uncomfortable with the resistance. I would feel that I don't know what the person, as a professional, I would feel unsafe and uncomfortable in my own skin. Maybe if I was not.
You would have thought that maybe it's about me, right?
Yeah, that like maybe I'm not able to ground that person. I don't know how to do that.
Definitely.
Those thoughts can come if you don't have that perspective. So anybody wants to share their thoughts?
Yeah. Please go ahead. There's no right or wrong answer. We're all training here. Um, there's no mark, there's no judgment. This is completely safe. Please feel free to talk about what your response would have been. And if you don't want to talk about what would your response have been then, you can also talk about what your response would be now. Yeah, maybe the person is rigid and not ready to listen or willing to change. So a lot of I'm seeing that before the trauma lens, you would have either blamed yourself or the client is what's coming up for me.
I
Any
would
other?
like to share a recent example, like if everyone is comfortable. Uh,
Definitely.
should I? Yeah. So just like Ira ma'am said, that it is not about just for psychologists. Everyone or other systems also should recognize it. So like by not taking the names, but I go to a prison for counseling. So there was one prisoner who was a transgender female. Um, but the police personals took her to the hospital and they made a Aadhaar card for her and everything, and they changed her gender to male, and they have put her into the male prison. So there she is not like, she identifies her as a female and she's more comfortable around females. So she was not comfortable there. She was like, if I was into the female jail, I would have got a sister or a best friend there to share my problems. However, here I have no one, and all I could do is that I could find someone elder to me and call him a brother. But she wasn't that much comfortable. So I just start like, what is, we only think about them in the general life, that is their acceptance or not, but they also face issues like this in prisons, hospitals. So all of these things also should be taken into consideration. Like, I never thought that they might face some difficulties in prisons, but this was a recent experience. I was like, oh, this is also the area where some work can be done, like making the police personals aware about it or something in the field.
Definitely. Thank you so much for sharing that, Kruti, because even I can really resonate with that. And I feel like, especially in our country, the police really need to be, police and also a lot of government authorities need to be trauma informed. Because I'll just share one more example with you guys. Trigger warning again. If at any point you feel it's too much, please let me know. So I was working so again, not taking names, but I was working with a few uh, two organizations combined together that were working with survivors, mostly children, survivors of sexual abuse. And the heartbreaking thing is that while they're trying to get justice for them, what they don't realize is that they have to give their testimony again and again. So to relive and retell that their stories again and again and again, at some point of time, a lot of them dissociate, or they just uh, there's like a split happening, which a lot of people often think, okay, this is this like symptoms of mania, is this psychosis, but it's actually their reality, like we talked about yesterday. The present reality is so unbearable that they need to go out of that moment, and that is why that zoning out, that out of body experiences, the depersonalizations that we talk about, that is how that happens. So thank
I
you
think
so
it's
much for
so
sharing that.
similar.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's also very true for rape victims, right? The way the police question them, and it's so intimidating, and I feel it's just not right.
Definitely, exactly. So that is why this larger, conversation of being trauma informed has been started recently. And the idea of being trauma informed is not just that so just like we talked about yesterday, like trauma can change your brain connections, but so can healing. And healing happens when there's connections built, when there is trust, and that is what is happening in our therapeutic relationships, right? We learn to first trust the process as therapists, and then we translate all of that to another person who needs it more. So, with that, I'll move ahead. So, how do we be trauma informed in this context? First, of course, we have to realize, like we all were discussing, that there is prevalence of trauma in the lives of children and youth we are serving. And of course, this goes for adults as well. And also recognizing that impact of trauma on communities, right, at large, because, and especially India being a very collectivistic country, we need to realize that the responses that happen are often happening in a domino effect. So if one person comes out, this does give courage to another to come out, but if one person is silent, then another person is also feels silent. So, of course, realizing and recognizing is the most important aspect, because a lot of times what happens is that people just straight out just don't believe the lived reality of people, right? And that can also end up being more traumatic than the initial trauma. Again, responding in ways that are informed by an understanding of trauma, which we all did yesterday, and what is needed to support recovery and resilience. So being trauma informed is also about, even if you don't know how, what to do with a person. Like in the starting, I think Kruti asked me that what can I do to increase their tolerance. For them, the most important thing is that they are able to trust someone and they feel cared for. That support means the world to them, because as people who do face trauma, the biggest you will hear their approach would be, nobody came to my rescue, nobody helped me, or nobody believed me. I kept talking about it, I told a lot of people, but no one believed. And finally, resisting engaging in practices that are re-traumatizing. So this can come in terms of practice, policies, and culture. So if in case, say, as you train, you finish your master's or your MPhil, you go to some kind of organization, you can always have your own workshops that teach others to be trauma informed. Because trauma informed is a lot about treating someone in a way that is assuming that, okay, I do not want to re-traumatize them, rather than proactively working on someone's trauma. We are going to work in a way that we would work with anyone, but at the same time providing the care that may not traumatize in any way or form, right? So, while being trauma informed is important, it is difficult. It is different from being trauma focused, as I was mentioning just before the session. It Trauma informed care, it focuses on prevention. Trauma focused care is working directly with trauma. And if you'd like to understand a little bit more about how we become trauma focused, as I open in the end for question and answers, we can discuss that a little as well. So, how do we know if we are eligible to work with clients from the community? One is, do not take any case as a challenge, and especially for vulnerable populations, don't think I have to do it or you owe something. If you feel that you are not trained enough and you still want to go ahead with working with the population, please get yourself trained first. Undergo the right training, because for them, they are coming to you as with a lot of trust, in the fact that you have undergone the right training to help them or care for them. And if you are ever in doubt whether you'll be able to handle the case or if you should take a case, you can always refer out. And if you're lucky enough, get supervision, and then you can, of course, go ahead with that. And usually, who you can refer is queer affirmative practitioners, which we've been talking a lot about before, right? Exactly. They can't be subjects to our experiments or skills if we don't know how to care for them. Maybe, sometimes we take initial sessions and it comes out later on that they are coming out to you because they trust you. So, in those situations, if there is not trauma, but there's a youth that's coming out to you, you can always refer them out, but don't refer out with a sense of panic. Refer them out with a lot of compassion and care, saying something like, I'm so I'm so touched that you feel so safe in our relationship, and thank you for having me a part of your process. I would like to understand whether you'd like to continue working with me, or would you like to work with a professional who's always had an expert who knows how to care for you in the right manner, something like that. And if they really want to do continue with you, you can always do that, and you can upskill, side by side. Great. Now this brings us to a long exercise. It's called the container exercise, and I will ask you all to close your eyes, and I'm going to narrate something for you. Right? I'm just gonna stop presenting right now, and if possible, just one or two of you, if you could have your cameras on, so I'm just able to have a look at you if there is some distress or something, and I'll be able to change the verbatim a little. I'll just wait for one more minute and then we can start. So this is essentially an activity that's going to help you and your clients both. And do you guys want to take like a 5-minute break before we proceed? Because this is the last activity. Um, so yeah, you can let me know about it, and then we will go to the question and answer. If you want a 5-minute break, just write yes on the chat. Okay. The purpose of the activity is so what happens is sometimes when there's a lot of information, right? And I'm talking about with the clients. Don't do the activity to just put everything we've learned right now in a container. It's called the container exercise. If you are aware about it, you can just write down in the chat the container exercise. The idea of doing this activity is when something very overwhelming happens for you in the session, right? Or not just in the session, but also if there's some feelings or thoughts or emotions that come up for you at a time which is really not the time for you. You know, that sometimes we are in a place where it's not the time, or like you don't feel comfortable in processing those thoughts or feelings at that time, right? So this is a activity that can help you to just contain all of that in a place inside of you until you can unpack it all again, right? Which often does happen with our clients as well. When you work with high risk populations, when you work with survivors of trauma, it is possible that you feel triggered. It is possible that you face what is known as vicarious trauma. Which what happens in vicarious trauma is that if a person is narrating their story to you and you know about their symptoms, it's possible you also feel that, right? Because we are human beings, and as therapists, I think we all are empaths. So it's very, very, very much probable that we feel all of that again. So this is the glimpse of the exercise, and I will be narrating the entire exercise to you so that you can do it for yourself, right? So can we begin? Okay. So please choose a seat that where you're like comfortable, and ensure you have some support to lean on, right? Even if you're sitting on a bed, if you're sitting on a chair, just put yourself like this on the back, right? And close your eyes. Great. So as you close your eyes, bring your awareness to your being at this moment. Just notice the breathing of the rhythm of your breathing. Inhale and then exhale, as if like the rise and fall of a wave. Just keep noticing your breath, like the rise and fall of a wave. Notice it without trying to control or count or hold back. Just be with your breathing. If you want to, you may allow yourself to experience breathing more deeply. You can notice the flow of air into your nose, following it to the expansion of your lungs, and then following it to the expulsion of air through your nose. Something may come up, maybe a sound from outside, a noisy thought from within, a body sensation calling out for attention. Distractions may happen as always, because that's what our minds do. But without judging yourself for getting distracted, just notice your awareness had flowed into something else. Gently guide it back to your breathing. If the body sensation wants you to shift your posture, please do so consciously and bring your awareness back to your breathing. Do you notice some things are still coming up every now and then? Just notice that it's natural, and that's what we are going to do now. Make a container that will enable you to contain these somethings. I want you to visualize a container with your eyes closed. Make it big enough to store all of these somethings and sturdy enough to hold them well. It can be just a box, a suitcase, a trunk, a drawer, or a bag, or even an entire closet. Choose any container that is big enough to store all of your concerns, thoughts, traumatic memories, and feelings. Now, I want you to take a good look at your container. What is the material? What's the size? What's the color and shade, if any? What's the texture like? I also want you to imagine in a locking mechanism on this container. Choose a locking mechanism that suits you and makes you assured that the container will keep your something safe till you choose to open it again sometime. It will remain tightly sealed until you wish to open it. Feel the lock, open and close it. Explore the container. Are you content with your container? If you're not content, you may try to visualize different qualities from what you already did till you feel content with your container. Now let's start putting things in your container. Start with what's the most accessible right now. Maybe it's a worry, maybe it's a concern, maybe it's a bad memory, maybe it's a feeling, maybe it's a sensation. Just anything that qualifies for the some things which were coming up earlier. It can also be self doubt, anxiety about the future, uncertainty. Anything that feels difficult can go in. Place each of these in the container. You don't need to organize it. Ju- Just make sure everything goes into the container. Once you're content with all the some things that were crowding your mind or disturbing you, causing you pain, is in the container, I want you to take a deep breath, blow out through your mouth like you would if blowing out a candle. Do this as and when you're ready. I will repeat this for you. I want you to take a deep breath, blow out through your mouth like you would if blowing out a candle. Now imagine yourself locking up the container. Make sure it's locked properly. Maybe the key or the padlock or the number combination, whatever the locking mechanism. Check and note any detail of the locking mechanism you need to. All set? Notice how you feel now. Notice your body sensations. Now return to your breathing. Just being with your breathing. Notice the rise and fall of the waves of your breathing. Notice the lightness of being at this moment. Notice how your feet, if they are touching with the ground, where you're sitting or standing. Notice the smell around. Notice the temperature of the space or the room where you're in. Count from 1 to 5, and at the count of 5, you may slowly open your eyes. Look around. Choose 3 things around you which catch your attention. Admire them for a few seconds. Notice how compassionate you feel towards those 3 things and your own self. And take one long, last, deep breath once you've noticed it, once you've noticed your own compassion. Okay, and if needed, you can just pull out your thing, rub your hands, create warmth in your hands. Just love yourself a little on the eyes. and come back. I'm gonna I'm going to give all of you a minute because I'm pretty sure you guys are at a 4 or a 5 right now. Okay, are we back? For the rest of you whom I can't see this writer yet, if you're back here, if you're with us. Also, if possible, write your energy check-ins. It's completely okay to be at a 4 or a 5. This was a calming exercise. 5, 5 and 8 after that. Nice. I hope no one's at 0 and falling asleep. 2, 6, 4. Yeah, I can imagine kind of. If you feel like you're falling down, just hold something like, something that with a texture. You can hold your pen. You can just stand up and sit down if that is helpful for you. Yeah. Okay. So, how was the exercise now? Little upset, but yeah, definitely that's the idea. I think the most beautiful thing that trauma informed therapy has taught me is that the resources that we often look for outside are also within us, right? And in a sense of fear and panic, we sometimes forget our own, strengths, potential, our own resilience. Great. Okay. So how are we feeling about, as practitioners after doing 2 days of trauma informed care? Do we feel a little bit more confident? Do we feel we have some self care exercises for ourselves and our clients? How are you feeling? Any questions? Any reflections? If you guys don't respond within 2 minutes, I'll have to turn on the Bhangra music again. Yes, Kainat, you've unmuted yourself.
Yeah, hello. So I had this question actually when you were showing the slide itself, where I responded that I would feel like the client is showing some sort of resistance. So I still want to know how you people would respond to it because I am a little confused. I'm still confused. If I was, because I'm not exactly trained in this, so I would have definitely like stopped responding as personally I would have waited for the client to say something or anything. So what would your approach be?
Sure. So the idea of showing you that question was also that sometimes all we need is a shift in our perspective of how we are viewing things. So I'll be very honest. Like if I was not trauma informed and I would have seen that presentation, I would have thought, okay, maybe this is a generalized anxiety disorder. Or if I would have mentioned the age of the person, and if it was below 18, I would say, oh, maybe this is oppositional defiant disorder, right? Because a lot of you also talked about how it seems resistant. But the entire idea of being trauma informed is that do you guys remember the slide I had shown yesterday about the four responses: fear, freeze, fawn? Remember that?
Yes. Yes, yes.
Yeah. So all of these reactions that we are seeing right now, instead of seeing as just clinical symptoms, what we are now seeing them is in a context. The very reactions that this person is having. These reactions might have been them re-experiencing or being in a flashback, and suddenly someone taps their shoulder, say, and they're agitated. They're agitated because nothing makes sense, right? Just imagine if you're stuck in a flashback, if you think you're stuck in that traumatic event, uh, and your brain, what the brain is trying to do with all these four responses is that as these reactions are also manifested, the brain is merely trying to recreate that situation in your mind, which actually is futile, right? But the brain doesn't know that. The brain thinks it's being very helpful, okay? And that's where the problem comes, and that's where trauma therapists come in. So, how we would have approached this, we would have not, like we talked about, it's not the client's fault, it's not my fault. You get it? And if we know the context, if say this person was coming with a history of abuse, it could even be domestic violence, it could even be emotional abuse where there's gaslighting happening, right? So gaslighting is so interpersonal in its nature. It's very very obvious that whatever their reactions with their abuser would have been, they translate to everyone in their life, whether it's a new therapist. It's not about me, it's not about them. It's about how we together approach a problem which seems unsolvable. That is the entire idea of the trauma informed approach. This may sound a little vague, but as you read up more, as you go through training, you will understand more in depth. Because, of course, I have been trained into understanding what these, yeah, externalization of it as well. Definitely. And another aspect of this is also uh, Kenneth, are you following, or do you want me to be a little more specific?
Yeah. I mean, it would be good if you could give an example, maybe.
Okay. Um. Okay. So say this person comes to you, and you don't have a history of abuse, right? You are seeing them just as resistant, as you said, right? But if we are trauma informed, we are going to, we're not assuming anything, but we are going to care, thinking about the fact that maybe there's something deeper, maybe there's something that they don't know. Sometimes because memory loss is a very core component of trauma. So maybe they don't recollect what had happened with them, and all they have to show for it are their symptoms. Does that make sense a little?
Yes, yes.
Right? So the entire idea is when they come to you, when you're formulating, when you're doing a diagnosis, you don't just use your clinical judgment in the sense कि oh ये तो DSM में ये है, ICD में ये है. We also
Mhm.
look at the context, and if you don't have the context, we are the client's advocate, right? So as being the client's advocate, we make sure that no treatment is done without ensuring that this person is okay or not okay. And although I went in very briefly of how we notice trauma symptoms, there is a plethora of literature of how we actually look at trauma symptoms, but it's very heavy. And you may be able to understand it once you have some clients or when you're in a training where supervision is available. Supervision is very important in trauma therapy, and anybody who does trauma work, they even if they have to get their own supervision, like they pay for it themselves, even if the organization doesn't collect it. It's very important because it becomes personal at times. You don't know where you end and where this person ends. Sometimes you can also come with similar trauma because uh, I mean, if you look at statistics about the violence that is there out in the world, and even say if in 1 in 3 people are violated, we are right now 9 of us. So at least 3 of us are here who are maybe violated or abused in some way, right? Sorry for triggering anyone. Do let me know if this is triggering in any sense, and we can have a session apart from this. So that's the entire idea of it. I hope I did not bombard with you with so much information that it stopped making sense.
No. Thank you. Thank you for your answer. I just had another question. Like, can you suggest any simple, maybe a beginner's book for trauma therapy or understanding at least trauma-informed therapy?
Have you read The Body Keeps the Score?
No.
Okay, that's one of the most like sought after book when we talk about trauma, and it's one of the books which I have found to be not triggering. And if you're into reading, then that's amazing. But otherwise, you can also look at um, videos on YouTube. Also, there are lectures of trauma therapy, and not trauma therapy, so to say, but trauma informed care. And there are a lot of resources available online nowadays with small pamphlets and things like that, which can actually help you just go through all of it.
Sorry, can you repeat the book, please?
Yeah, I'll just write it down in the chat.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much.
No problem. Any other questions? Any other reflections? I know this was a very heavy session, and thank you to all 6 of you for still staying till here. Okay, let's do a final energy check then. On a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being the lowest energy, 10 being the highest, where are you guys at? Thank you, Kavya. 8, 9, 8, 8, 8. Nice. Any closing remarks? Anything at all? Any questions? They can be personal as well. Doesn't matter. This is a safe space. None of this goes outside. If you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling concerned about your safety right now, anything like that, just we can talk about it a little.
We can stop the recording also for if anybody wants to
Yeah,
just stop.
definitely.
Yes, if anybody wants to share anything personal, just drop a text before and stop the recording.
We have
So 2 more days, Sunday and Monday. This will only few people. So I will tell you tomorrow and day after will be mostly expressive arts. So expressive art contains a lot of things. That can be storytelling also. That can be art also. That can be movement also. Theater also. So mostly there will be 3 things: the drama, movement, and art. Tomorrow will be more focused on body, which would like sort of continue with Bhavya's aspect also, because we talked so much about body and about trauma and how it manifests. I think that will help in it. And day after tomorrow will be art based, where we use we'll draw. So it will be more art based. So for tomorrow you can just bring a journal and a pen, that would be fine. Like just a paper and pen, that would be good, because we're doing more on basis of body. And day after tomorrow you would require some colors and paper. Yeah, I think those 2 things will be fine. Color, sketch pens, any way that you paint if you like, because you will be drawing something. Same time, yes, 7 and Monday 7.
me
I'm
too.
excited to.
I'm going to be a participant now.
Yeah, like I was in. So for my reflection for this workshop, I feel that a lot of insights came to me. And when I was putting that container things in the container, that container, when she was telling that it will have a lot of things, it became so big in my imagination. It kept getting bigger. I was on a beach and it was a cyan colored container, and it kept getting bigger, bigger, bigger. But when the moment she said that you can put like you have full control of it, then I became bigger, and I was more bigger than the container, and now I can manage this container. Then I started putting things in. I think it was very interesting reflective for me. I thought I'd share it.
That's really
So
amazing.
Yeah, that activity just made me, oh, okay. First, the container is not in my control, but the moment somebody supports and tells me that it's in your control, I make it in my control. I'm making myself more bigger. So resilience also came in, like we talked about. And generally, I think queer aspect was so informative. A lot of things I was also going to talk about. I Pavas talked so well about them already. And I just feel that all of us need to be, if we are in this field, we need to be queer affirmative therapists. We are one of the very big stakeholders of, for the queer community and any marginalization. So, yeah, if we're queer friendly right now, hopefully all of us, then we need to become queer affirmative. And yeah, supervision helps a lot in order to deal with this. So, I hope we all be queer affirmative as soon as possible.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
So yeah, just like you said that when she gave us the control that you are the in charge of the, and it was like, okay, there are certain things which I'm never gonna look back to. Go hell, do hell with it. It's locked and it's away. So that feeling is really good. That okay, I don't have to look back to it. So it was really calming and good. Like it made me feel happy that okay, gaya.
Thank you for sharing that. Amazing. Any closing reflections or feedback for me? Anything that we may have missed out on, or something you felt that could be more inclusive or something like that? Okay. So I think then, okay. Thank you for this. Thank you. Thank you for participating throughout. Thank you. Great. I guess then we can just end the session. Thank you everyone for joining.